Imagine holding in your hand a simple coin, one that has passed through countless pockets, purses, and cash registers across America, and yet beneath its modest size lies a deep story of history, art, economics, and the enduring legacy of a nation. In 1976, the United States was celebrating its bicentennial 200 years since the Declaration of Independence, a year marked by national pride, parades, fireworks, and a series of commemorative coins minted by the U.S. Mint, including special quarter, half-dollar, and dollar designs that featured unique patriotic themes. But among these widely recognized bicentennial issues, one coin quietly continued its role in circulation, unchanged in its outward appearance, yet deeply tied to the broader story of American numismatics, the Jefferson Nickel. The 1976 Jefferson Nickel may not bear a special bicentennial design, but its history is intertwined with the period it represents, and to understand its importance we need to go back not just to 1976, but to the very origin of the Jefferson Nickel itself and the circumstances that shaped its creation. The Jefferson Nickel was first introduced in 1938 as a replacement for the Buffalo nickel, a coin that had been admired for its artistic beauty, but criticized for the difficulties it presented in mass production. The U.S. Mint needed a design that could strike more cleanly, last longer in circulation, and still capture the values of the nation. And so Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States, author of the Declaration of Independence, and a central figure in the early republic, was chosen as the portrait to appear on the 5-cent piece on the obverse. The profile of Jefferson was engraved by Felix Schlag, who won the design competition, and on the reverse, Jefferson's iconic home, Monticello, was chosen to represent not just a residence, but a symbol of architecture, intellect, and the ideals of the early nation. By the time we reached 1976, the Jefferson Nickel had been in circulation for nearly 4 decades. It had become one of the most familiar coins in American pockets, unchanged in its basic design, since 1938. While other coins were undergoing redesigns or receiving bicentennial treatments, the nickel remained constant, its presence almost like a thread connecting Americans of the bicentennial era to those of the Great Depression era. When it was first minted, the 1976 nickel is a fascinating study not because of its rarity in ordinary circulation, but because of its context. It reflects the steadiness of American coinage in a year of great national celebration and change. It was minted in huge quantities by both the Philadelphia and Denver mints, and it also appeared in special collector proof sets struck at the San Francisco Mint. In those proof versions, with their mirror-like finishes, collectors today still treasure the 1976 nickels as pieces of the bicentennial period, even if they did not carry the bold, special reverse designs of the quarter, half-dollar, and dollar. Now, to fully appreciate the 1976 Jefferson Nickel, we must also understand the technical and production aspects of the coin. The composition of the nickel at that time remained the traditional alloy of 75% copper and 25% nickel, giving it that distinct silvery color and durability. The coin weighed 5 grams with a diameter of 21.2 millimeters and a plain edge. These specifications had been consistent for decades, but the process of minting them in the bicentennial era carried with it the challenge of meeting extraordinary public demand. Since so many commemorative coins were being struck at the same time, the U.S. Mint needed to maintain balance in producing standard circulating coinage, and the nickel was central to that need. Collectors often ask what makes the 1976 nickel special compared to other dates. The answer lies in the historical connection rather than dramatic design. Change it is a coin of everyday America in a year when patriotism was at its peak. It circulated side by side with bicentennial quarters, half-dollars, and Eisenhower dollars coins that drew the spotlight. But the Jefferson Nickel quietly did its job, reminding the public of stability and tradition in numismatics. This makes the 1976 nickel significant for those who value the continuity of design and the way it represents Jefferson's enduring role in American history. When we dive deeper into the historical Context of 1976. We find layers of meaning. Jefferson himself was the figure who drafted the Declaration of Independence in 1776, and 200 years later, his portrait continued to grace a coin in daily use. The symmetry of this is remarkable. A man who penned the words of freedom was still present on the money exchanged freely across a free nation 2 centuries later. Though Americans may not have paused to consider this, while buying groceries or paying for gas, each time a 1976 nickel passed from hand to hand, it echoed that bicentennial spirit. For collectors, certain varieties of the 1976 nickel add extra interest. While most were struck in standard circulation quality, there are examples from the San Francisco Mint in both proof and special mint sets, and these coins often exhibit deep cameo contrasts, where Jefferson's portrait appears frosted against a mirror background. There are also small differences in strike quality and condition that make high-grade examples particularly valuable today. A 1976 nickel in pristine mint state, with full steps on the Monticello reverse, where the architectural steps are fully defined, is a prize for collectors because it reflects both exceptional minting quality and careful preservation over nearly 50 years. The 1976 Jefferson Nickel also belongs to a broader numismatic journey during the 1970s, a time when inflation was rising, the value of metals was being carefully monitored, and the U.S. Mint was constantly evaluating coinage needs. Though the nickel remained stable in composition, its role in commerce was essential, and its circulation numbers reflect that millions upon millions were struck, ensuring that this coin would remain one of the most common sights in the pockets of Americans. The coin is a time capsule of economic history, showing us how the nation managed everyday currency during a turbulent decade. As we look at the legacy of the 1976 nickel, we see that it is more than just a 5-cent piece. It is a link between Jefferson and the bicentennial, a quiet companion to the louder commemorative designs of the year, and a coin that carried forward a design introduced in the late 1930s into the late 20th century. Its story touches art through Schlags, design history through Jefferson's roll economy, through its production and circulation, and patriotism through its presence during America's bicentennial celebrations. Today, numismatists who study the 1976 Jefferson nickel are not just examining metal, but uncovering a story of America itself. So the next time you see a nickel from 1976, remember that it is not merely a coin, but a piece of history, born in a year of celebration, tied to a president who defined freedom and carried forward by millions of Americans who used it without even thinking about the depth of its meaning. The Jefferson Nickel of 1976 is one of those treasures that may appear ordinary, but when studied with care reveals extraordinary layers of value.